Oh, wrong button. Anyway, what am I doing here? Okay, let's see if audio is working. Technical difficulties out of the gate. Okay, I can hear some audio. So, hold up one moment. Let me tell the vacuum to be quiet. How is this running? I don't get it. It's 8 o'clock, right? Okay. It's one of those weeks. Good morning. Buenos dias. Cafe Negro. Black coffee. Enjoy. Okay, let me get back in here. So this week was a bit of a crazy week, and it is not yet over, and we'll see if I get through this. Hello, Mo. I seem to not have escaped the viral gifts of my family, so we'll see. Okay, so ask a question. Comment on Twitter, YouTube, or Twitch. Let's test this crazy technological platform to see if it all works. So this has been quite a week, starting with the weekend when I picked up my family from the airport. They returned from a 3-week trip to China, and they brought home some biological goodies. One daughter had a stomach bug. The other daughter brought home COVID. So I'm about to see if I escape that or not. We'll see. So this week's weekly project is survival. See if I can survive. In addition to everything being sick, my wife was in a minor fender bender car accident. Everything is fine, thankfully, but just topping off the week. And one weekly project is looking into building a help desk ticketing system to have a formal system, process, procedures team for customer support, customer service, help desk, trouble tickets, support calls, things like that. We've been able to kind of manage it ad hoc, but I have been using a help desk system for years for another product that I support, and I use that system to support about 500 customers. So it has It's not fancy, it's not revolutionary, but just it's a simple structured system for managing tickets that makes things much more efficient. And when you have that system in place, your ability to receive, manage, organize, and respond and close out support tickets efficiently, it's pretty dramatic how much it can improve that process. So I am looking into that. We are going to be evaluating 3 different formal help desk systems, and we will be developing use case scripts for us as the support team, and we'll also be evaluating the experience for the customer or partner who submits the support request. So from both perspectives, what is the user experience? And we'll be choosing one and implementing it. And we'll also be integrating into other systems. So we're going to have Azure integration, App Insights integration, and other automated processes that we run. Those will integrate and automatically issue a ticket if we detect, for instance, a build pipeline failure on a PTE on Next Miner. That'll automatically issue a ticket, say, okay, something happened here. What's going on? Let's evaluate. Let's triage. Does this need further attention? So that is the plan this week. Have had 2 calls already, 2 more calls today to evaluate the ticketing systems, build the scripts, and build that system. So to tell you a story about how rough it's been this week. Yesterday, I was on a call with a prospect, and I was giving a demo, and I looked down at the system clock because some timing wasn't quite right, or something wasn't doing exactly what I expected. And so I just glanced down at the system clock, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the system clock on my computer is off. Maybe that's the reason. Well, it said 8/1/2024, August 1st, 2024. I didn't even realize what the date was. And for some reason, looking at that date, I was like, oh, my system clock is wrong. I didn't realize it was already August. And so we had a good laugh about that. Yeah. So anyway, that's how my week has gone. So Monday, lunes, was pretty much a catch-up day, and it was kind of nice. Caught up on stuff. Stuff piles up, administrative stuff. So I did emails, caught up on support tickets, did some various reconciliations and documenting transactions and making sure everything was squared away there. And then you may have noticed I caught up on some podcast episodes. So these live streams are recorded in audio form, but I have to take the audio file, do some trimming and cleanup, and then publish them as podcasts. I wish there was a little more efficient way, but yeah, I guess I could pay someone, but I'd have to deal with that as well. So yeah, I'm trying to catch up. My podcast subscription only allows for, I think, 3 hours a month. And so because I'm so far behind, I think I'm going to have to pay to catch up and publish more episodes. So we'll see how it goes. I may skip a few, may not sure. But I believe I maxed out my monthly allocation till August 29th. So yeah, I just missed the deadline to get them published. So we'll see. But anyway, if you do like podcasts, you can listen to me rant in audio form only if you would like. So that was my Monday. And then on Tuesday, martes, had an interesting internal meeting to discuss a customer requirement. They want to integrate with a payroll service, apparently, and have a fully automated integration between their payroll and Business Central. And not surprisingly, the payroll service rep we spoke with was not a technical person, and so she did not know what the options were for integration to their platform. She was vaguely aware of SFTP and CSV file, but she didn't have any details on, what were the SFTP requirements, username, password, private key authentication, or, things like that. Didn't know the CSV file format. So we're having to, give the customer an estimate or try to figure out what next steps are and what solution would we use. If we did use SFTP for a CSV integration to Business Central, how would we do it? Would we do Power Automate, pull the SFTP, parse the CSV, and make general journal or some type of journal API calls into Business Central. Do the journals have what we need? We don't think so, because the customer uses dimensions and it doesn't look like those dimensions are available with the default BC journal API. So would we need a custom API? And do we instead use a third-party integration tool which uses the OData web service endpoints, which I know Microsoft does not recommend? And then we got to pay for the third-party product. We got to configure it. So, you would think this stuff would be kind of straightforward, but unfortunately it's not yet. So we may just end up building something because we expect we're going to have this scenario enough that customers won't want to deal with all this mess for an external integration if this is all they're doing. And I actually did the same thing in Dynamics GP. I developed a free tool that does data export via stored procedure, SQL stored procedure, export to CSV or tab delimited or pipe delimited, whatever they want, exports that data to CSV, and then does the SFTP upload to whatever service they're using. And it also does SFTP download to disk, and then an integration can pick up from there. So I developed this tool because I ran across this issue so often, and SFTP is just not convenient to work with unless you have a dedicated integration tool or a connector. It's just a hassle. So it came up enough in Dynamics GP world that I created a free tool to do it. So we may just do the same thing for Business Central. Not sure yet. And then I had clase de español por la mañana, my morning Spanish class. If I slaughtered that, my apologies. And we are up to, I think, 500 words and phrases now. I have a slide later on about that. And so it's getting kind of tough to keep up. And then I had the usual Tuesday afternoon ERP Center of Excellence training. So just busy day every day, 10 hours of the ERP Center of Excellence training, 3 hours of Spanish class a week, and then calls, meetings, have at least 4 to 5 hours of our internal development calls every week, internal projects, help desk stuff. So it has been a busy week. So random topic that came up based on a totally unrelated conversation, not related to work. It surprises me, and let me know, am I the only one who sees this? But it surprises me the number of people that I encounter who don't seem to understand or have the self-reflection or the ability to realize that they are not applying what is generically called second-order thinking. And you may hear it as second-order thinking, second-order consequence, higher-order thinking, higher-order consequence. And let me just read this explanation that came from a Farnham Street blog, fs.blog/second-order-thinking. First-order thinking is fast and easy. It happens when we look for something that only solves the immediate problem without considering the consequences. Keyword there, without considering the consequences, because that requires thinking 5 minutes ahead. Second-order thinking is more deliberate. It is thinking in terms of interactions and time, understanding that despite our intentions, our interventions often cause harm, or can cause unexpected consequences. Second-order thinkers ask themselves the question, and then what? And many of these blog articles, it's kind of frustrating because these blog articles and these people promoting, their Substack or whatever, they talk about, do you want to be smart? Do you want to be an influencer, a super decision maker? It's more like a flattery and ego thing. But just at a base level, folks, you got to have second order thinking in order to survive and be successful. And here's a quote that the Farnham Street blog includes from Ray Dalio. Failing to consider second and third order consequences is the cause of a lot of painfully bad decisions. Understatement of the century. And it is especially deadly when the first inferior option confirms your own biases. Absolutely, you'll see this all the time once you start looking for it. Never seize on the first available option, no matter how good it seems, before you've asked questions and explored. So, simple analogy. Imagine playing chess and you only look at the move that will solve one specific problem on the chessboard. Oh, there's a pawn. Let me move to capture the pawn, or let me move to block the pawn. Let me move to do this one thing and not consider the consequences of, if I move there, I may achieve that one short-term goal, but that's going to result in that piece being lost and my queen being captured, or a check or a checkmate. So in chess, obviously, you make a move, you consider the implications, the direct first order implications of that move, but then you consider the second, third order, fourth order moves. And I don't know how far ahead, grandmasters, chess masters, experts look when they play chess, but I'm pretty sure it's at least 2, 3, 4 moves ahead. And they can just see the implications, like looking into the matrix. They just see how things are unfold. Good afternoon, evening, Julius from Hungary. Welcome. So second order thinking is like playing a competent game of chess. And, you don't have to go 10 steps ahead, but at least think 2, 3 moves ahead and just at least ask the question, what are the implications? And a few examples of this, of first order thinking. This is an absolutely amazing story of unintended consequences. So that is a byproduct of first order thinking, or not very good second order or higher order thinking. So this was an article or a story that went around a couple years ago, I believe. And if you may recall, there were all sorts of these, I'll call them Western programs to help save Africa from malaria. And this program was, hey, for 50 cents, you can donate a mosquito net to some country in Africa to save them from the scourge of malaria, which legitimate concern. Malaria is a huge problem. So they thought, great, we're going to do good. We're going to help Africa, and we're going to pass out these free mosquito nets. Well, turns out they didn't think through the potential adverse consequences of that program. And it turns out that the people in Africa receiving these mosquito nets were pretty clever. They thought, well, these people are giving us boxes and boxes and containers of these things. And I don't really see malaria. Like, it's a thing, but I do know that I need to feed my family every single day. And what do? They use the mosquito nets to fish. So they go to the local freshwater rivers, local waterways, and they throw these mosquito nets out and catch fish to feed their family today. Immediate concern. Not the potential hypothetical distant or, future concern of malaria and its consequences, immediate concerns. In a sense, first order thinking, first order consequences. So they take these mosquito nets, which, by the way, are treated with toxins or pesticides, put them in the waterways, catch fish, potentially introduce the pesticides into the water, and also get that on the fish and their food, consequently. And now they're projecting, the Westerners are now projecting some significant consequence to the plan to hand out mosquito nets. So people are not using them for malaria, they're using them for fishing. The fine screen of the mosquito nets is picking up all sorts of juvenile fish, so it is depleting the stocks of the fish. It is depleting the future stocks of the fish by overfishing, essentially, of the juvenile fish, and introducing pesticides into the water and food supply. Just the mind boggles at how that has unfolded, from people trying to do something legitimately, they thought they were doing good, and now just flooding countries with free mosquito nets and governments passing them out to this. And if you say, don't use the mosquito nets to fish, the response will be, would you rather I starve to death? That's the response in the articles that is mentioned. So fascinating consequence of first order thinking and unintended consequences. Another one, which I am literally experiencing now because I live in California, the unintended consequences of California's $20 minimum wage for fast food workers. And not only the state of California, but individual cities in California, they seem to be in a contest to try to one-up themselves with this. During COVID, it was decreed that grocery store workers and grocery store workers alone were saviors of our food supply because they went into work and they dealt with the presumably unpleasant working conditions, limited staffing. It wasn't a logistical mess, but cities declared that those workers were more valuable than all other workers and therefore they should receive a state-mandated or city-mandated higher wage. Instantly, grocery stores just started closing. The one we went to just immediately closed. They said, nope, we can't afford it. This store is not making enough money to justify the additional expense. Grocery stores closed as a result of that. Now we're seeing the exact same thing. It's like a playbook of unintended consequences. The state believes that raising minimum wage will somehow resolve an economic situation. But if you've ever been to McDonald's, I haven't been in a long time, but last time I walked in, there were literally no humans. There were no store employees in the front part of the store. There were just these kiosks, and everyone's looking around like, what do I do? And my kids fortunately knew what the process was, and you're able to order through these robotic kiosks that is just baffling process, no humans in the restaurant. Same thing here. So a restaurant we used to go to regularly, it is empty. They shut down, and I think 60 of the stores of that fast food chain have closed, and they just gave up and declared bankruptcy to end their franchise in California. So unintended consequences, people lobby, and it's very common in the political space, right? We want this, government must mandate this, and there's no consideration of the intended or unintended or predictable consequences in the political space. So that's just a very common trope in a sense. Another variant of this is perverse incentives. You think you're providing an incentive, or someone thinks they're providing an incentive, and they may have good intentions, but lots of stories of this, classic stories. And some of these are anecdotal, but they've kind of become a lore. So you may have heard of the cobra effect in India, where people were paid to capture cobras for the safety of the people. And that introduced cobra breeding farms because people are paid to hand in cobras. So cobra breeding farms sprung up. It's like, great, I've got my payday from the government. Afghan poppy farms, same deal. People were paid to destroy poppies, so they just started growing poppy farms all over the place. Javanese hominin skull fragments. Bring in fragments and we'll pay you. So they'd take the whole skulls, they'd smash them in the fabric into fragments, and they'd get paid for every fragment. And they realized this and were horrified. Transcontinental Railroad, paid by the mile. So guess what? Rather than have a nice straight track, the Transcontinental Railroad zigs and zags in order to increase the distance of the railroad. So you really got to think past incentives. And this is a classic in the ERP space or the business space where salespeople, or it's a classic one, salespeople are paid commission on certain incentives. And that results in abuse of those incentive programs. Like when the salesperson is paid to close a deal, guess what? They'll say or do anything to close a deal. A classic that I got was the salesperson was so proud that he closed this new customer for, at the time, Dynamics GP. He hands me the signed engagement letter. I'm like, great, I'm going to go implement. Well, it turns out that he quoted, estimated everything himself without talking to any consultants. Guess why? Because the consultants say, oh no, there's this complication, this effort, and your budget keeps increasing. So he just made up a number, sold the implementation, and then handed it off without telling anyone. Well, he hands me a 40-hour implementation. It turns out this company has 13 different legal entities. Imagine the data migration for 13 companies in under 40 hours to implement the whole ERP system. That was dropped in my lap. He got his sales commission. What did I get? I got yelled at for not being under budget. So you really got to be careful about incentives and the second order effects of those, right? So then, these are classic lines. I just picked these off the top of my head, but there are probably better examples of ERP-related second-order effects and second-order thinking. It should work like our old system. That's just a classic trope. We're just going to, I've heard the term lift and shift, but we're going to implement the same business process, the same system design, the same system configuration as what we had in the past. It worked for us for the last 15 years. It's good enough for the next 15 years. And they don't utilize new system features, new efficiencies, new configuration options, things like that. Massive cost in doing that. We absolutely need these 27 customizations. And then they are so locked into all these customizations that it's a maintenance nightmare, it's a configuration nightmare, it locks up the underlying ERP system like Business Central, causes all sorts of costs on the margin that you could anticipate if you thought through them. I had a customer, we need to restrict the security of every single field. Field level security to lock down this field, that field, that field, that field. And it was like gridlock on every window of the ERP system. It was just absurd. And you just couldn't do anything because you didn't know the implications and what would break. And it just froze their system in time. They didn't upgrade for years. Enable change logging on everything. Classic request. I want to know what every change was made, every record, every, insert, update, delete, who did it, when did they do it? I want reports. Spend all this time and then it just bloats the database, right? Classic one right now in Business Central, attach files to every transaction. And they're realizing, wait a minute, how come our database is 78 gigabytes? Like we've only been using Business Central for, 18 months. It's like, yeah, you don't have capacity to copy your production environment to a sandbox. And guess what? Try cleaning up all 76 gigabytes of PDF attachments throughout your system. You'll find out what that's like as well. And an absolutely classic line that I look for and I'm waiting for it in every conversation. Oh, we always do it this way. Really? Do you always do it that way? Oh, yep, always do it that way. And then I pause and I say, okay, are there any exceptions to that? And the person who claims there's no exception says, nope. But then there's, thankfully, someone else in the call is like, well, what about that customer, that vendor, that transaction type, that scenario? That's different. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's true. There are always exceptions. And you may think there are no exceptions today. In a week, in a month, in 3 months, there will be exceptions. So you have to accommodate those, right? And obvious, when automated testing is too expensive and, it's a matter of pushing costs from the present to the future and kicking the can down the road, whatever the analogy may be. So those are just some classic ERP second order effects that, we're all aware of. So, as I mentioned, Wednesday was a fun day, confirmation of COVID, car accident, and I had the fun experience of realizing that a firewall firmware upgrade that I did on July 21st, turns out that firmware upgrade has a significant bug. The upgrade process corrupted the firewall rules for traffic, and my MSSP, Managed Security Service Provider, did not bother to mention that. After recommending this firmware version, they did not follow up and notify customers of this now known bug. So the upgrade corrupts the rules, which involves deleting the rules and changing rules to have random values. So instead of sending traffic to my VPN appliance, it's sending traffic to some other object or device on my network. And yeah, no bueno. So not good. So I discovered this and I'm like, what is going on? Oh yeah, that's a known bug. Thanks for letting me know. So now I have the firmware which they claim is stable. I need to downgrade, wipe my config, hope things go well, reload a config, and cross my fingers. So that is what I am going to try to do this afternoon. And page inspection auditing. I was on a call with a customer, a Business Central customer, and we were looking into how he would call our custom API that we developed. And he used the company name in the URI. And I was like, oh, no, you need the GUID. Let's grab your company GUID. Well, I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to grab the GUID for the company ID. And he didn't really have access to, say, Postman to call the company API endpoint. So it's like, well, let's try going to the company page and opening up Page Inspector, and we should be able to see the ID there. Well, he opens Page Inspection, and this is what we see. And I stop and I think, what is going on here? Now, I've never seen this before. I shoot this over to Tanya. She's like, yeah, I've seen that before. I don't know what caused it. I'm like, okay, thanks. Like, as soon as I see this, I'm like, there is something strange going on. Like, what is up with this? And this needs to be fixed. So I asked about this on Twitter, and I got thanks everyone for the responses. It was really interesting. So Tin, very cleverly, I should have thought of this, right? I'm constantly promoting Central Q. He jumps over to Central Q on his mobile device, and he asks, like, what could cause this? And this particular Central Q response only mentions system object 5330 related to page inspection. Now, this was partially potentially correct. I need to look into the details. But then I found it also mentioned I forget the permission set, but it had to do with like test tools. But I went over and looked and tried to remove the test tools, and I removed all permissions from this test user except for D365 Bus Premium, Business Premium. So I removed all other permission sets, and Page Inspection still worked. It removed some of the field labels, interestingly and oddly, but the fields were still visible in Page Inspection. And then I received a reply from Mariano. So Mariano says you can remove the execute permissions on objects 5330 and 1350, depending on whether you want to show hide the fields on the page. And I assume he's kind of encountered this in some form or another. And I looked into it further, and I was like, well, why would anyone do that? Like, that's pretty obscure in permission sets, right? That took some effort. And he theorized, as he understands it, page inspection allows you to see data in the associated table to the page you're inspecting, even if the field is hidden on the page you're inspecting. So that could be a problem for data considered sensitive, I suppose. So I think that is accurate, insightful, all makes sense, like as to why someone might do this. And so that I would agree that seems to correlate. So I asked again on Central Q, what is the tool zoom system object, which is 1330, because 5330 didn't seem to fit the bill perfectly. And Central Q came back with the tool zoom system is a feature known as page inspection. So apparently these are the two components, underlying components, these system objects for page inspection. And if users do not have permission, they can still access page inspection, but will only see the page and table fields, not the individual fields. So then the question is, well, we're working with this customer. Who did this? It's not something you would do accidentally, right? Like, I tried to exclude these two objects, but even the D365 business, whatever that permission set was called, it apparently includes access to these. So you'd have to go to great lengths to remove all default permission sets, implement 100% custom permission sets, figure out what everything is needed while removing access to 5330 and 1350. Not a small amount of effort. So I'm assuming this had to have been intentional. So anyway, fascinating rabbit hole that we went down, and I need to look into what's going on. Who did this? I don't think it was us. So a partner we're working with might have done that. I don't think the user would have done that. So what is going on with this customer that they locked it down? And was this really an intentional process? And goes back to second order thinking, right? They did this, presumably. Now we can't even use page inspection. And maybe there's a user that we can log in as, an elevated permission user to log in as. But now, like, I couldn't even tell this guy how to look up this field value in order to do the testing he needs to do. So it's pushing costs onto us later, that decision to restrict it. And maybe there's a valid reason for that restriction, but it has costs. Okay. And then on Wednesday, I kind of attempted to attend this webinar. I was having to do school registration at the time, so it was not, I wasn't able to attend the whole thing. But if it's of interest, another anti-siphon training webinar called Practical Windows Forensics for Fun and Profit. So this guest, Marcus Schober, he goes through and shows how to do Windows forensics on a machine. Kind of the first 20, 30 minutes was talking about how this could be a career, but then he finally gets into analysis of forensics on a Windows machine. So I need to rewatch this. There's the QR code. There is the YouTube link. So just as you know, cybersecurity is kind of a side hobby for me, so I will be looking into that. And related cybersecurity note, this was a fun story. Anyone into cars and F1, things like that. Ferrari is in the news because an executive at Ferrari got a call from someone claiming to be the CEO talking about acquisitions. And the Ferrari executive realizes something is a little odd. And somehow this person knew that it could be a voice cloning scam. And the person asked the CEO what book that they just talked about. It's like, hey, what book did we just talk about the other day? And of course, the attacker could not produce the answer. And I've thought about, like, should I do this with my family? And this is I've read stories about this. And it's like there are these fake calls that claim they've kidnapped your family member and you need to wire money or whatever. And they have a person yelling, screaming in the background. It's this whole elaborate setup. And you just ask a question, what is the name of our oldest dog? You don't even need to have a dog. And if they answer, Fido, then it's a fake call. So this is a story in Fortune magazine, and this was apparently Rachel Toback was interviewed, and she is a cybersecurity expert who does social engineering, I believe, of various forms, and she has implemented AI in her workflow. So there is a QR code to this Forbes article. I don't know if it is paywalled, but you can potentially look this up on the Ferrari story. Very fascinating and quite amazing that the Ferrari executive who got the fake call was able to identify it. Like, kudos to them. There must have been some oddities in the conversation, but the fact that they were aware enough to suspect something was strange, be aware of the concept, and to ask the question, pretty bold. Many people in corporate environments, when they're called by a higher executive, are reluctant to do that. They're kind of they follow directions and they think they're doing a good job by doing so. So that was a very interesting story. And speaking of AI-related technologies and social engineering, this, I believe, is a new competition, brand new competition from Social Engineering Community, se.community, called the John Henry Competition. And this is fascinating. It is a contest pitting human social engineers, cybersecurity experts who do social engineering for a living, against AI tools that attempt to perform social engineering. And you will see Rachel Toback there. someone named Freaky Clown, aka FC. I'm not familiar with him, but I probably should learn more. And then Corgi, who I am familiar with. She is a social engineer, very, very talented cybersecurity social engineer and pen tester. And so this is an interesting contest to pit humans and AI head to head to see who captures the most objective during live phone calls. Not quite sure how they're going to structure this and make this work, but they have a whole panel of contestants. These are the judges, so they'll have human pen testers and social engineers, and then a team who has built AI tools to go against the humans. So fascinating competition, and that is sec_defcon on Twitter. And back in the BC realm, we once again, reminder, there's the Doug meetup in Dublin, Ohio, August 27th, 28th. Embassy Suites by Hilton. There is the Eventbrite QR code. You can go to dynamicsusergroup.com/meetup to check out the Ohio Regional Meetup and other meetups throughout the world. And just another plug for TechFluent Academy. Amazing program. If you are not familiar with it, head on over to techfluentacademy.org. And this is a nonprofit organization that helps people train, reskill, get entirely new careers in their lives. And the candidates are truly amazing. These are people who have heard about TechFluent, signed up, agreed to participate, gone through what I believe is a 5-week intensive full-time career prep program that provides career skills as well as a kind of a broad overview called the Foundation Program, I believe, broad overview of Microsoft technologies and career options. And then those people who complete that Foundation Program have the opportunity to apply to the part 2 of the program, which is the actual, 8 or 10 weeks of training on a Microsoft technology or platform. Business Central, CRM, CE, F&O. CE includes Power Platform. There's F&O, sales and service, finance, operations, and service. Sorry, I don't know what it's called these days. And then there's a fourth one. I can't remember what the fourth Microsoft platform technology was, but they can choose provide 2 top choices of which track they want to, depending on what they found interesting, their background, and then the training type, live, virtual, or self-paced, whatever works well for them. And then they complete that program and they become candidates or graduates of TechFluent looking for career opportunities. So if you are looking for someone in the Microsoft Dynamics realm, obviously they will be fresh out of this program. They will not have 3 years of experience, but I highly recommend you speak to some of these candidates. They are amazing. Just even if they don't have 3 years of a Dynamics experience, their professionalism, they are put together. They show up for job interviews. They will have a great conversation. They are very eloquent, well-spoken, mature, thoughtful people. It is really amazing. And I strongly recommend looking into these candidates instead of just contacting a recruiter and paying the $19,000 for the recruiter fee plus, say, Business Central training in order to pay to get someone up to speed. Find a TechFluent candidate and then pay to have them continue their Business Central or F&O or Power Platform training. I think you will be pleasantly surprised. That is what my feedback based on the candidates I've spoken to. Excellent, excellent top-tier candidates who have chosen to invest in their careers and taken the initiative to participate in this rigorous program. So, with that, Thursday, Jueves, Plaza de Español. And there's the number I'm looking for, which I'll need to look up because I don't remember what it is. 470 palabras y phrases, which I think is 470 words and phrases. If I'm not mistaken, it tells you where I'm at. I use Google Translate to figure out that phrase. So what is happening is we're doing 2 Spanish classes a week. And let's say we get anywhere from 30 to 50 or 90 phrases in each class. Well, you're like, cool, class one, I'm doing okay. I can study those. Class two, okay, now I've got 100 to study. Class three, 150. And they just keep piling up. And I just notice I'm falling behind no matter how much I do the flashcards. Only so much can sink into this granite brain of mine. And yeah, it's pretty tough to do a 2 class a week. And I sponsor people in El Salvador to take an English academy, which is 5 days a week, 90 minutes a day. And it is intensive. And somehow, I mean, perhaps because it's 5 days a week, 90 minutes a day, they are able to keep up and progress. It's got to be brutal. So hats off to Enrique and Edgar and Fabricio and Daniela in El Salvador taking that program. I mean, holy cow, that is intense. And it is really amazing to see their progress. I am not anywhere near the progress in my Spanish that they are in English. So I have a profound appreciation for people who are putting in significant effort to study. Okay, and I had another TechFluent candidate interview on Thursday, so that was 2 this week. Both great, strong candidates. The initiative, the self-starter attitude is just really impressive. I then had a prospect call with the Business Central ISV, which is interesting. The Business Central ISV is looking to sell their solution. The Business Central customer is wanting their requirements met, and I'm being asked to facilitate how to put these two together, even though it's not my customer and they're not with us as a partner. So it's kind of a strange scenario there, but I've had it before. So I need to catch up on statements of work, story of my life. I have 2 that I need to do and was asked to do 1 more by the ISV. So yeah, if anyone has any tips to get statements of work done and designs and specs and requirements, it's just time consuming. It is really hard to get the requirements documented properly, to come up with a solution, figure out a design, talk with the developer to kind of estimate how are we going to achieve this. Yeah, I wish I had a better solution. It's just a very labor-intensive process. And then yesterday, another ERP Center of Excellence training session, and the candidates in El Salvador are helping with the help desk project that we're implementing, and they will be helping me design help desk requirements, come up with our scripts, our use cases, evaluate the help desk systems, test them, see how they meet our criteria and our particular needs, and then we're going to implement. So that is a hands-on project they're going to help with. And then welcome to Viernes. Cheers. And live stream. Here we are. You are here. Morning ERP Center of Excellence training with Jocelyn, and then weekly client project review meeting, and then another afternoon ERP Center of Excellence training. And I think I am the recipient of a cold virus, COVID, not quite sure yet. So I am fading. So we'll see how long I last today. And excellent update. We're building in Berlin. It's been an interesting journey going from, I'm just going to provide training to Salvadorans. Like, how cool would that be? Fly in for a week and then they're magically trained. They can get a certification and then they'll just go off and get jobs in the Business Central realm. Well, that was very naive. And so this has just been slowly progressing to become larger and larger. And then it went from just having a week training in San Salvador to having candidates in Berlin, having an office in Berlin, having a training program in Berlin, making that a part-time 1-month training in June where I stayed there for an entire month and training candidates, bringing them up to speed from scratch. Like, what is a consultant? What is a fiscal period? What is a purchase order? Every single thing from terminology, vocabulary, lingo, concepts, business processes, all the way through Business Central RDLC reports, like A to Z from the ground up. And now I'm at the point where it's like, okay, well, trying to ask people to provide work or employ the candidates, that might be challenging. And the feedback I got was, no, we're not interested. So I'm like, okay, well, we're moving on to just build products and services that we will offer from El Salvador. So we're just going to go for it. And so we are building products and services. So we're going to make that happen. So that is the new direction of ERP Center of Excellence, to make that self-sustaining as an organization for the candidates, the trainees, give them direction, a path for having this a sustainable career option for them that is not exclusively dependent upon job offers, opportunities, or work from outside El Salvador. So we'll see how that goes. It's gone pretty well so far. So my crazy idea seems to be working somehow. So we'll see. Yeah. And Q&A. Any questions, any thoughts, any comments? Jump on in, say hi. And the question, I think I forgot to mention this in last week's live stream, but I did a poll on Twitter on July 19th, and my Twitter polls are not, obviously not scientific, not a huge sample size, but my question to BC developers was, do you run scheduled build pipelines for next minor and next major for your PTEs? And I ask this because we now do. So every single project that we have that is in DevOps has an automatically scheduled build pipeline. So we do our build pipeline for, say, the next release, and we have scheduled pipelines against next major and next minor. And I asked this question because we got our first pipeline error against next major. And I haven't seen it since, so I need to follow up and see. It probably hasn't been 15 days, but we need to look into it. We got a really strange build error against next major. And it appeared to be a data type conversion error on a string field or a text field. And we stared at the error, we looked at the code, and it's baffling. It's just trying to check to see whether a field has a value. And like, it's not failing on the current version, but it's not failing on next minor. It's failing on next major only. So very interesting. We're guessing it's an interim, like maybe a bug in next major, and like it's going to get resolved in the updates to next major as it progresses. But that made me ask this question. Now, I am very dubious, suspicious of these results. I do not at all believe these are in any way accurate, because I suspect that the majority of these 52 votes are from European BC developers. And substantiating that are the responses that I received. I believe all 4 of these individuals who replied, provided context, are out of Europe. So Killian, Arthur, Eric, and Inga, all from Europe, BC developers, and they responded essentially yes, 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 and not yet. So I like the honest answer from Inga, not yet, but we are working on it. And I totally understand it is not something you just flip a switch and magically it works. You've got to deal with whatever your DevOps infrastructure and pipeline infrastructure to make that happen. So that, I believe, I suspect the 51.9% of votes, what is that, 27 or whatever votes that is, who voted yes, I suspect a majority of those are coming out of Europe. And so for my US colleagues who are doing BC development, I speculate that the adoption of automated build pipelines and testing against next minor and next major, I speculate, based on conversations I've had, that the adoption of those tools is much lower. And even if you ignore the composition of that yes response, we have 38.5% saying no. Okay, are you working on it? And then 9.6% no idea what that means. And who knows? That could be anyone saying, I'm not a developer, and just clicking no. But I suspect adoption of build pipelines, scheduled build pipelines, and testing against next minor, next major is well under 50% adoption. And I'd be surprised if it's even 25% adoption based on the anecdotal evidence I have, conversations I've had, just kind of assessing the conversations I've had at conferences. People may claim they do these things, but then I see their pipelines. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So, folks, we have some work to do in the BC community. When PTEs and even worse, app source apps start breaking, we're going to have some issues. And I don't know, maybe people just deal with it and it won't be obvious, but we've been speculating about this potential looming problem for several years now. And I don't know how people are dealing with it. But anyway, with that, El fin de semana is upon us. I'm losing my voice. We'll see how I fare this fun, gosh, I already forgot it, Viernes? Friday? Yeah, Viernes. So have a good weekend and have some coffee, get some rest, learn something, and adios.